They met under different skies, one group sailing in wooden ships from an old continent, another living from the rhythms of seasons, rivers, and migration. At first, the exchanges were curiosity, food for food, knowledge for metal, often cooperative, sometimes cautious. But curiosity became competition, trade became entitlement, and soon the soft embers of encounter became a roaring blaze of conflict. This episode will take us from the first fragile meetings on the Atlantic shore to pitched battles that reshaped entire regions. This is Episode 2, Contact Turns to Conflict, from Untold American Legends. When Europeans first stepped onto coasts of the Americas, many native nations met them with a mix of caution and hospitality. In New England, in the Chesapeake, on the Gulf Coast, and along vast river systems, indigenous people offered food, guidance, and local knowledge that kept early colonies alive. Early accounts recorded neighbors helping one another, women trading seeds and techniques, elders teaching survival, and young men assisting with unfamiliar tools. These exchanges saved lives. They created temporary ties of friendship and dependence. But these were not equal relationships. Colonists came from a world of private property, charters, and imperial ambition. The arrival of more ships changed the calculus dramatically. More colonists meant more land, more demand, and more pressure. And so a pattern formed: initial welcome, increasing demand, broken expectations, then confrontation. The first century of contact became a slow-motion collision. Jamestown, 1607, England's first permanent foothold in North America, was a struggle for survival. Disease, famine, and poor planning stalked the colony. When the colonists staggered toward starvation, the Powhatan Confederacy intervened. They traded corn, taught local horticulture, and selectively aided the newcomers. But their generosity had limits. As the English multiplied, they extended farms into native fields, cut timber, and imposed their rules. Colonial hunger for land and control transformed relations from survival alliances to territorial conflict. By 1610 to 1622, tensions intensified. The First Anglo-Powhatan War, punctuated by Captain John Smith's rule and later raids, foreshadowed a grim truth. Helping to survive did not guarantee mutual respect. When colonists felt threatened or hungry, they took what they needed. Technology altered the battlefield. Firearms, steel blades, and horses, introduced by Europeans, shifted power dynamics. But it wasn't only weapons. Infectious diseases delivered the most catastrophic blows, killing large portions of indigenous populations and weakening the political structures that sustained communities. Yet native nations adapted. They learned to use firearms, they developed new tactics, and they negotiated shrewdly with European powers. But even skilled diplomacy had limitations when land-hungry settlers kept arriving. The demographic collapse followed by European population growth was the invisible tide that fundamentally altered the continent's balance of power. As the native population shrank, colonial claims felt easier to assert. Claims soon hardened into deeds, and deeds hardened into laws. The Pequot War, 1636 to 1638, was among the earliest large-scale conflicts in New England, brutal by any standard. Competition for trade, suspicion, and earlier incidents created a volatile mix. English settlers, allied with rival native groups, attacked Pequot villages at Mystic and elsewhere. The results were devastating. Hundreds killed, villages destroyed, survivors sold or dispersed. The Pequot War marked a grim model. Colonists justified total destruction of enemy villages in the name of security. Indigenous enemies who were allied with English colonists became tools in campaigns against other native nations. This practice deepened divisions and made long-term peace harder to achieve. The cycle of alliance and reprisal would be repeated for centuries in different forms: native against native, native with European allies, and European power against anyone who stood in the way. By the latter half of the 17th century, pressures exploded into King Philip's War, 1675 to 1678. Metacom, known to the English as King Philip, led a coalition of Wampanoag, Narragansett, and Nipmuc peoples in a desperate attempt to stem colonists' inexorable expansion. The war was savage. Towns burned, farms destroyed, thousands died on both sides. For many colonists, the war confirmed dark fears. For native communities, it confirmed that resistance came at a staggering price. King Philip's War remains one of the deadliest conflicts per capita in early American history. It reshaped the demographic and political landscape of New England. After the war, native presence in much of the region was greatly diminished. South of New England, the Chesapeake region endured its own conflicts. Tobacco cultivation, profitable but land-hungry, pushed English settlers into Powhatan lands. Relations oscillated between uneasy trade and open war. The Anglo-Powhatan Wars, 1609 to 1646, illustrated a pattern. Colonial economies that demanded land would inevitably collide with established indigenous land use. As plantations expanded, so did the need for labor and land. In this way, economics helped drive the conflict as much as ideology or misunderstanding. Europe's rivalries imported another layer of complexity. France, Britain, Spain, and the Netherlands each courted different native nations, allegiances shifting with trade and geography. In the interior, the French allied with certain nations to secure the fur trade. In the east, English ambition pushed inland. Native leaders used these rivalries strategically, playing powers against one another, extracting trade benefits, and trying to preserve autonomy. But European competition had a dark side. As colonists consolidated power, the very alliances that had once protected indigenous interests were exploited to weaken rival nations. It's a crucial point. Native nations were not passive victims. They were strategic actors. They negotiated, fought, forgave, and rebuilt. Many leaders, Tecumseh, Pontiac, Metacom among them, sought to unify diverse nations against colonial expansion. They formed coalitions, used diplomatic leverage, and sometimes adopted European military techniques. Their decisions were shaped by survival, long-term strategy, and the desire to protect their peoples. But the tide was strong. Demographic loss, colonial legal systems, and an economic hunger for land made the long-term prospects grim in many regions. Contact had already turned to conflict, sometimes slowly, sometimes suddenly. Battles were not isolated incidents, but part of a broader pattern, a clash of worldviews, economics, and survival. What began as a fragile meeting of civilizations had become a violent remaking of the continent. In the next episode of Untold American Legends, we will explore the rise of organized resistance, coalitions, confederacies, and leaders who tried to push back. We'll follow the human stories behind battles, the diplomacy that almost worked, and the desperate attempts to hold land and culture together. If you want to stand with these stories, subscribe, like, and share. The truth must be told.